The year was 1995 and I was 16. I lived in a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house in a middle-class suburban community with my mom, 2 younger brothers, and our 140-pound Doberman Turbo. From the front door of our house, which is relevant, you could see directly into our living room, which had an open concept floor plan with the kitchen and dining room. Our couch was on the wall directly in front of the front door. It was the summer between my sophomore and junior years in high school. My brothers and I spent a decent amount of time outdoors because this was back when people still did that. I suppose anybody paying attention knew who lived in our house, and I suppose they knew that the only adult was gone when the only car was gone. However, prior to the man showing up at the house, I'd never noticed anything off, and I never noticed anything afterwards, so maybe we were just a random target. It was a Saturday, and Mom and the boys had run to the grocery store. In Nevada in the 90s, almost nobody had air conditioning, so to cool off, you would open all the windows and doors and use fans. On this particular day, I had the back sliding door and front door wide open to get a cross breeze. Neither screen door was locked. I was napping on the couch in full view of the front door in shorts and a tank top, with unlocked doors. It's good we gain intelligence with age. In my defense, there was 140 pounds of protective dog muscle on the floor next to me, and probably only for that reason am I alive. Around the approximate time I expected my family home from the store, Turbo began barking. Assuming he was barking at their arrival, I told him to shush and tried to go back to sleep. Turbo, bless his sweet protective soul, continued to bark, becoming more and more intense and even aggressive with his barking. Finally, after about 5 to 10 minutes of Turbo refusing to be quiet and my family never coming in from the car, I sat up, realizing something was wrong. A man who I didn't know stood seemingly frozen, staring at my friend's seat and barking Doberman. Assuming that the man had some appropriate business at my home, I hurried the 10 steps to the unlocked screen door, constantly shushing Turbo. I apologized for my dog and for not hearing his knock. He never actually knocked. The man explained that he was from the phone company and he was here to check our lines. He never took his eyes off of Turbo. Turbo never stopped snarling. I leaned forward far enough to see the street. Only unmarked privately owned cars lined the streets. I looked at the man who was dressed in tennis shoes, jeans, and a t-shirt. I was 16 and dumb enough to nap in front of an unlocked door, but I was no fool. Phone company personnel. A. Always wear uniforms. B. Always drive company vehicles. C. Don't come without being called. And D. Don't usually work weekends. I looked at the man who had yet to look up from the 140-pound dog that was now foaming at the mouth. I grasped the screen door handle and held it. This got his attention. He met my eyes as I said, "You have 30 seconds to show me identification or I open this door." I don't even think he made an incoherent excuse as he ran away. I fell to my knees and hugged Turbo. I then gave him all the meat in the fridge. I believe with absolute certainty that I would have been attacked if we hadn't had him. I like to think that if I hadn't had a huge, overly protective dog, I would have been in the habit of locking doors, but what would a screen door latch do against an intruder? And that creep stood there and watched me for 5 to 10 minutes. Perhaps he was paralyzed in fear, but maybe he was working his angles and only Turbo's insistent display of his willingness to kill anyone who threatened me changed his mind. That's my theory though. Turbo has long passed unfortunately, but his legacy lives on. And 2 loving, loyal, and lethal when necessary dogs sleep in my room every night now. I was a pretty brave person when I was younger, or maybe I had that sense of invincibility that comes with youth. I'd survived some things, like a stalker who pursued my sister and me for over 1.5 years, being assaulted, 2 house fires, and growing up in a house that I swear to you was haunted. Not in that Disney kind of way either. I'm talking about a torture chamber in the basement and strange things going on. Anyways, I suppose looking back, that having been through all of that made me feel a little bit like either I was sort of invincible or maybe I just assumed that I'd gotten all of the bad stuff out of the way and nothing else would happen. Whatever it was, I learned to know better. When I was 17, I didn't have a driver's license. In fact, I was 36 before I did. I walked most places, occasionally catching rides with friends and, less occasionally, hitchhiking. The night in question was one of those seldom seen occasions when I decided to hitchhike, having worked late and being too exhausted to walk. Now, most of the time when I'd hitch a ride, I wouldn't get in the car with a lone man. Only women or rarely men with a wife and girlfriend, and or kids in the car. This night though, cars were few and far between, and it was cold. And really, if I'm being perfectly frank, when he pulled over, I took a good look and figured I could take him if he tried anything. He was on the slender side and had a strange frailness about him, even though he looked healthy enough. I got into the car after we agreed on a destination. We exchanged names, and I warmed my fingers in front of the heating vent. He spoke quietly, asking a few questions along the lines of whether I was a local and how I liked living there. He said he'd only been there a couple of months but found it beautiful, and hoped he could find happiness here. That comment struck me as a little bit weird, but I brushed it off. It began to snow and the road quickly got slippery, so he slowed and kept his eyes straight on the windscreen, driving silently. I was okay with that, as small talk was never my forte. About 10 minutes later, I noticed a car near the intersection we were approaching seemed to be sliding, so I said, "Watch out." He immediately hit the gas, shooting through the intersection, and burst out with, "Don't ever scream at me." Needless to say, I was taken aback. I said, "Look, this is close enough. Just pull over here and I can get there." He didn't seem to hear me. Richard, did you hear me? I said you can pull over here and let me out." No response. He just stared straight ahead, driving faster now than he had been since it began to snow. To say I was scared doesn't seem to cover the depth of fear that began to rise in me. I don't know if I should stay quiet or speak, but I was damn sure not going to yell after his outburst. After about a mile, he began to mumble under his breath. I couldn't quite make out what he was saying, but I assumed he was speaking to me, so I said, I couldn't hear you." He began to speak quietly and rapidly, saying things like, "You're always yelling at me. I told you time and time again I do not appreciate being yelled at, but do you listen?" "No." "Well, I'm done listening to you. Do you hear that?" I was at a complete loss. I didn't know what to say in response or if I should say anything. I contemplated just jumping out of the car, but noped that idea out when I realized the door lock was missing. There was just a silver-lined hole where it should have been. I started to cry and debate with myself about causing an accident by grabbing the wheel and hoping for the best. At least I figured there was a chance I'd survive that. When he suddenly looked at me for the first time since I'd gotten into the car, he blinked several times, rapidly, then slowed the car, pulling into a gas station. I waited to see if he would unlock the doors, not wanting to say anything to set him off again. After a minute or so, he quietly said, "I think I better let you out here," and hit the button to open the locks. I wasn't going to hesitate. I jumped out of the car as if it were on fire. I was about to turn and walk into the gas station when he called my name. He looked so damn sad that I hesitated. He apologized and said he was sorry if he frightened me, that he never would have harmed me, and asked if I would be able to get home okay. I said I would and closed the door. He began to pull out of the gas station lot, but stopped suddenly. He just sat there for a couple of moments, his head down. I froze, wondering what the heck he was up to, and was about to run into the station, but he opened his window and yelled at me, waving something in his hand. It was my hat. I left it on his seat. I warily approached his side of the car and he handed it to me, apologizing again. I didn't know what else to say, so I just said thank you. I watched as he drove off, making sure he was out of sight before moving on so he wouldn't know which direction I was heading. I decided to go to a friend's instead of home. As I walked, I went to put my hat back on. Out fell a piece of paper. Folded into the paper was a $100 bill. The paper said, "I'm sorry. Please take a cab and don't hitchhike anymore tonight." I didn't. In fact, it was the last time I ever hitched a ride alone. I'm 20, from Dublin, and this happened last April with my two best friends, Sierra, who is 21, and Naomi, who just turned 18 3 weeks before the whole thing. We'd been out in town, nothing bad, just dinner and a few drinks at a place on Camden Street we liked. And on the walk back towards Rathmines, we cut through Palmerston Park because it was a nice enough night and none of us were ready to go home yet. If you don't know Palmerston Park, it's a public park in Dublin, enclosed, green. The kind of place families use during the day and people walk their dogs in the evening. There's a road that runs alongside the inside perimeter for maintenance access, single lane, and at the time of night we were there, maybe 11:30, the park was basically empty. Maybe a few dog walkers earlier, but they'd be gone by the time we settled on a bench near the fountain in the middle. We were just talking, sitting on the back of the bench with our feet on the seat. Sierra was in the middle of a story about something that happened at her work, and Naomi was eating the chips she insisted on getting from the chipper on the way, and I was half listening and half looking around the park, enjoying the night vibes, just aware of my surroundings without being anxious about it. That's when I heard the car. It came in through the park entrance fast. Too fast for a park road. Too fast for that time of night. Engine very loud, and it felt aggressive rather than accidental. The headlights swung across the path in front of us as it came around the perimeter road, and something about the combination of the speed and the lights and the sound of it made every part of me go alert before I'd even consciously process why. I stood up off the bench. Sierra stopped mid-sentence and just looked at me and then at the car, and I saw her face do the same thing mine had just done. That instant recognition that something was wrong before you had the language for it. The car slowed when it got leveled with us. Dark colored, 4-door, couldn't tell you the make. Windows down, 2 men in the front that I could see, and I don't know how many in the back. They were looking at us, not glancing and not passing by, slowing down and looking at us with a specific quality of attention that I cannot fully describe, except that every instinct I had was screaming. Naomi was still holding her chips. I said we needed to go now, and I said it in a voice I didn't recognize as my own even, and I grabbed Naomi's arm and we moved. We went towards the south side of the park, away from the perimeter road, cutting across the grass towards the nearest exit gate. Behind us, as I heard the car accelerate, and then the sound of doors opening while it was still moving, and then feet on the path. I looked back once. 2 of them were out of the car and running towards us across the grass. The car itself was still moving slowly along the road with the headlights tracking our direction. We ran. I have never run in my life this way that I did. Naomi is small and fast and was ahead of me almost immediately. Sierra is taller and covered huge strides beside me. The exit gate on the south side opens onto a residential road, and I was praying the whole way across that grass that it wasn't locked because some of the park gates lock at a certain hour, and if it was locked, I didn't know what we were going to do. It wasn't locked. We came through it and turned left onto the road without slowing down and just kept running. There were no houses with lights on. A car parked with somebody sitting in it on their phone, and normal human life everywhere, and I have never been so grateful for that. I looked back from the end of the road. The 2 men had come through the gate and stopped on the footpath outside the park. They were standing there watching us go. The car had come around and was idling on the road just inside the park entrance, headlights pointing out toward the street. We didn't stop running until we were on Rathmines Road, with people and buses and lit shop fronts all around us. Naomi still had the chips. I don't know why that detail has stayed with me, but she was standing on Rathmines Road with her chest heaving and a half-eaten bag of chips in her hand. And she looked at me and I looked at her, and we both started shaking at the same time. We called the guards from a cafe that was still open that let us in without question when Sierra knocked on the glass looking the way we looked. Gave them everything we had. Description of the car, description of the 2 men we'd seen clearly, and the direction they went. The guards were decent about it. Took it seriously. Sent a car to the park. Took our statements. They found nothing by the time they got there. The car was gone, the men were gone, and the park was empty. We gave descriptions as best we could, but it was dark and it had been maybe 40 seconds of actual visibility, and fear does something to your memory that makes the details slippery. I know what I felt more clearly than I know what I saw. What I felt was that those men knew exactly what they were doing and had done it or something like it before. The speed of getting out of the car, the way they split, the car continuing to move to cut the other exits. That was an impulse. That was coordinated in a way that still makes me feel sick when I think about it. Sierra said afterwards that the thing that scared her most was how quiet they were. No shouting and no words at all. Just out of the car and running in complete silence like they didn't need to communicate because they already knew their roles. Naomi didn't say much about it for a few weeks. Then one night she brought it up out of nowhere and said she kept thinking about the 30 seconds between the car slowing down and us starting to run. She said she kept going back to that window, wondering what would have happened if we'd hesitated longer or if I hadn't stood up when I did. I think about that too sometimes. Half a second is nothing. It's like the difference between already moving and still sitting on the back of a bench trying to decide if you're overreacting. The guards followed up once, maybe a week later, to say that they hadn't identified the car or anybody connected to it. Said they'd keep the report on file. That was the last we heard officially. About 2 months after it happened, Sierra found a post on a Facebook community group for the area. A woman asked if anyone else had a frightening experience in Palmerston Park recently. Her daughter and a friend had been approached by men in a car in the park and had run and gotten out safely. The post had 17 comments. 4 of them were from different people describing near identical situations in the same park across the previous 8 months. Same description of the car in 2 of them. Same park and same method. Multiple incidents. None of them connected officially as far as any of us could find. I don't know if any of those other incidents were the same men. And I don't know if what happened to us was the end of something or the middle of it. And I also don't know if they're still out there doing the same thing in the same place to other girls who cut through the park on a mild April night because it seemed like a nice idea to them. We reported it, and we did everything right. As far as I know, they were never found and nothing was ever resolved. And that park is still there, obviously. That gate still opens from the inside, and the perimeter road still runs all the way around it in a loop. I haven't been back since, and I don't think I will be. So I told 2 weird encounters I had on Miiverse, don't judge me, to my best friend, and he said it would maybe fit here, so here I go. This story is the least traumatic one out of the 2, but tell me if you're curious about the other one. By the way, sorry if my English sucks. So at the time I was 12 years old, and I was drawing anime on Miiverse because I had nothing better to do with my life. One of my drawings seemed to have caught this 18-year-old dude's attention, so he decided to compliment my drawing in the comments. I answered his comment by thanking him. He kept commenting on my posts, and since I always replied, we eventually started having conversations and became friends after a short time. A week or 2 later, he confessed his feelings to me. I was extremely nervous about it. I didn't know what to say, so I just said that I was sorry and didn't really answer his confession because I was too scared to answer, so he took it as a yes. Just a reminder, he was 18 and I was 12, so it already sounds pretty bad. As days, weeks, and months passed, he was trying to be more and more flirty with me, and I was trying to endure it by just answering yes, or yep, or uh-huh. He even told me about his fantasies and all the things he wanted to do with me, especially my feet. I was trying really hard to be open-minded and tolerant even though I was extremely uncomfortable, and I absolutely despise feet. He also kept bugging me about not always being able to answer because I had to go to school and study and stuff. He kept telling me that I should just skip school or even drop out so I could text back, or that he would do something horrible and the blame would be on me, while reminding me that I don't have any other friends anyway. As I was young and naive, I would do my best to stay by his side out of fear that he might actually hurt somebody. Or me. I wanted to be kind and helpful with everybody, so I tried my best. At some point, when he vented, he pulled out some edgy roleplay crap, like getting consumed by darkness or revealing the hidden dark side and stuff like that. I was baffled, but I didn't want to be mean, so I tried to play along to cheer him up, even though he probably wasn't serious. Now that I, 23 female, am back from Germany, I've had some time to think over the events of my trip. But it's hard to think positively considering what happened to me the last night in Stuttgart, and I'd like a place to talk about it. I'd spent about 2 weeks traveling Germany for the Euros, and considering how many fellow Scotland fans were over for the games, I never felt completely alone, despite being a solo traveler in a foreign country. I guess I became too naive in how I trusted the older groups of Scots who'd buy me drinks and chat with me all night about where they're from and who they knew. Just typical Scottish chats. I let my guard down. That last night in Stuttgart happened like most other nights in Germany. I'd be by myself and would get noticed by a group of older men or women who'd inquire as to who I was with. When they heard I was alone, they'd remark on how brave I was as a good-looking lassie being here all by myself. I'd then be integrated into the group, drink with them and celebrate, and that night cry with them after Scotland lost. Determined to enjoy my last night, I said goodbye to my new friends and donned a short white dress draped in my Scotland flag and went out looking for a good place to drink and dance with strangers that I would never meet again. I met a few people that night, but it was while I was alone that I met him. "That bag's bigger than you are," I heard as a jolly older man wandered over to me. It was true. I had my rucksack with me that night. "So, where's your boyfriend to carry it for you?" "Not sure yet. Still deciding if he's going to be German or Scottish." I quipped back with a smile. Most of my interactions would start this way, with a friendly interaction resulting in an offer to come drink with their group. And after offering to take me to a nearby Irish pub to drink with him and his family, I graciously accepted and we began walking. He was overly exaggerating how incredible he thought I was for doing this alone, bowing to me and excitedly telling passers-by how I was myself and how brave it was. I would smile kind of awkwardly and change the subject. I wish I could say alarm bells were ringing, but they really weren't. After all, he was just a wee Scottish grandpa, one of many I'd met that night. He began prodding me on if I had somewhere to sleep tonight, remarking how they'd had a room in their hotel if need be. "I wouldn't force myself on you or anything," he said. I froze. That was so unexpected. I truly looked at him for the first time since I had met him. He was a relatively short guy, taller than me, but with a large build and wrinkles to match the white hair that was poking out from under his Scotland cap. He began quickly explaining how he knew I'd be cautious about that sort of thing being a smart girl, that I could trust him, but again reiterated that he wouldn't do that. I laughed nervously as all the beer I drank earlier seemed to drain from my body, and I began taking in my surroundings. Where did you say your family was again? Just in an Irish pub up this hill. So, like I was saying, I didn't really pay attention to him. We were still on the populated main street of Stuttgart, but the numbers were dwindling the further we went. My ears pinged an alert to my brain, signaling I had just missed something important or horrifying, so I mustered up a smile and politely asked, "What did you say sorry for?" "That I'm vegetarian, because I killed my 44th man in a vegetable field." "Oh, I've been deployed in loads of countries. The first 6 lives I took were in Ireland." My blood ran cold. I am a descendant of Irish immigrants who fled to Scotland to escape the brutality of the troubles in Ireland. Did this man kill my family? Killed 12 in Iraq, too. I could only listen to parts of his ramblings as I began desperately planning my escape, locking eyes with every person that walked past. There weren't many. We had almost reached the top of the main street now. Why are you so tense all of a sudden? The words brought me back to the conversation. You know I can read you like a book, right? I'm doing all of this for you, see? I want to protect you. And, Molly, I can guarantee you right now, you don't realize how much danger you are in. I felt a gentle tap on my shoulder, spinning around to see a young German man smiling at me. Scotland. He motioned to my flag. I love Scotland. Is there anywhere to eat around here? I blurted out, staring at him, praying I'd turn around and the old man would be gone. Brief confusion crossed the German man's face before the old man began rapidly jumbling up the sentence, saying something in German, or trying to, in an attempt to sound as if he were speaking German. The young man pointed in the direction we just walked from. There's a McDonald's down there. I turned back to the old man, whose look I could only describe as emotionless, as if he were staring through me like I was no longer there. I felt another cold shiver before smiling. I'm going to grab something to eat, but I'll meet you in the Irish pub later. As if snapping back to his jolly self, the man quipped, Nah, don't be like that. I'm off to a rave just now. I'm playing at it, and you don't want to miss it. I'll catch you later, I smiled. The man's face again dropped into a blank stare before he turned and walked off. I think the German man called after me, but I didn't hear him. I kept my head down and walked wherever my feet wanted to take me. I couldn't think, only walk. I don't know how I got to the train station, nor how I got to the hostel. There were no Irish pubs in Stuttgart, or at least not in that direction.